Let's call the meeting to order. Let's see, this is Zoom as well as in person. Should we do everything with the roll call and all that?
You don't need to do roll call because all your members are present in the room.
Okay, well, I'll just comment that all our members are present. So we'll call to roll, let me call to order. Are there any additions and corrections to the agenda? GM,
There are none,
okay, and
or are there some? There might be some.
So far.
You want to, should we have the minutes indicate we have an alternate for today's meeting?
yes, it should.
Mhm.
I didn't even look at that part. Okay, as an alternate today, we have Director Eisenhart.
I would have said it, today the role of Karen Paul is going to
Is
be
being played by.
Mark Eisenhart.
Okay. And Karen Paul couldn't be here today, so we still have a quorum with the alternate. Okay, so that's for the record. No additions. Well, there may be a couple additions or corrections to the agenda. As we reach them, you will tell us about that. Any public members at all? Any comments from the public, if there are any public members?
Chair Riley, it's just staff members that are present as attendees.
Okay, well, we may hear from them, but not as a public. Okay, action items. Item number one, the minutes from March 11th. Are there any comments from the board, from the committee?
Move approval.
I'll second. I have no comments on the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 You gotta mute yourself.
Did we get three?
No, I'll abstain.
And one abstention. Motion carries 2-1. Okay, next item is item number, wait a minute, let me get to the right page. Item number 2, which is the treasurer's report for February. Nichelle.
Chair, committee members, this is our standard monthly report for the month of February, and I'm going to share my screen. It's just like that. So the district started the month of February with 25.6 million in cash and investments, and ended the month with 27.81 million. Fee deposits and water sales revenue in the amount of 4.3 million was received. Total cash disbursements amounted to about 2.16 million, and out of that, 30,000 were paid out as conservation rebates. The big part that you see in the fee deposits, that's related to water sales revenue for the month of January and December. So that number's a little high. So that's exhibit 1 of the report. Exhibit 2B is a list of payments made to vendors, along with a list of rebate payments. And then exhibit 2C that summarizes the statement of revenues and expenditures for the month of February. Till date, the district has received revenues of about 19.4 million and has total expenditures of 16.03. That's for sure.
I have a couple of questions, but probably directed to the GM. I still see, and I'm not concerned at all, but I just need an explanation, I think. I see some retired staff members consistently in this.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, yeah, what's the status they carry, or is it retirement, or is it the?
Yeah, it's post-employment health insurance. So as an example, you'll see Henrietta Stern on the first page of that report, followed by Ender. Ender was, so Henry was a project manager. Ender was tech support, IT. And then 3 more down, you see Larry Hampson.
Right.
These, and they're all the same amount.
right?
So that's the post-retirement health insurance.
On the next page,
And then John Lear, who happens to be kind of in between those, that would just be a normal expense reimbursement. For current employees.
right, and then the next page, I see Andy Bell and Arlene and Joe Oliver. They pretty much, well, they're not necessarily all the same amount,
Yeah,
but they're in the same category.
depending on whether, so there could be tier one employees or tier two, and then we reimburse them based on actual expenditures. And then the ceiling, there's a ceiling of, I think, $1,400, $1,400.30. So if their actual reimbursements are lower, we just.
And there's a requirement that retirees, when they hit Medicare age, participate in Medicare. So then that further reduces the district's exposure because it'll be beyond that, you know, like the Part B of, you know, I don't know, but there's, so once you take Medicare, for those who are on Medicare, they'll even be a smaller.
And so this amount would drop, I mean, when that happens. Well, what it shows is they're not that old yet.
But, you know, keep in mind, when we talk about budget and mid-year budget and the full year budget, we've been showing you both a PERS liability and an OPEB liability.
Right,
OPEB
right.
is the post-retirement
Right.
benefits. So as we get more retirees, that actual out-of-pocket has gotten bigger. And I think that although we modified the benefits for the tier two employees back when PEPRA was passed, you know, we'll continue. I mean, luckily, we have a youth movement, you know, now shifting to younger employees. But we've had a lot of recent retirees, and then we still have a few more who are going to show up on this bill for the first time.
Well, and then didn't the district change the retirement plan to have a reduced participation level at, I don't know what year that was.
PERS almost pays for itself with the new employees, but the retirement benefits are really a byproduct of what we've offered people. So we did tighten them up a little bit. Also, your payouts when somebody leaves, or you get payouts for sick time accrued and vacation time accrued. That should have gone down a little bit because we changed the caps. But when you retire, it's I guess I'll say windfall. I mean, it's still a nice payout for those folks, and the health benefits are still pretty good.
Well, and it's not just the water district, cities, counties, school districts, they all do this. Yeah.
Some are richer than ours.
Okay, just wanted to cover that. I see the names. I thought, I don't see them here, but I do see their names. Okay, I have no other questions about the financial report. Does any other committee member have any questions, comments?
Hey, yes, Chair, thank you. The money market check, I'm looking at 2A. Got a million, 1.5, and then we got that in parentheses, the next one over, 3.7.
Yes.
Why is that?
Which one
What
are
we
we-
got going?
Which one are we looking at?
Oh, 2A.
What?
Yeah, so, let's see if I can bring it up. If you. there's a-
Let me just slow down.
Oh.
Let me just slow down. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I see it.
You
Mark,
see it?
do you have-
Yeah, I see it.
Okay,
So, the district collects all the deposits and revenue in one account, which is the money market account, and then it makes all the disbursements from the checking account. So every month, there is a movement of money from the money market to the checking account. So that's the 3.75 million that you're seeing. And then if there's, an excess in the money market account, you could also move it to LAIF to get some higher yield. So the 3.75, out of that 2.25 was sent to LAIF. 1.5 was sent to the checking account.
Okay. So we don't lose money on that, interest or anything, doing that kind of stuff? I thought once your money in money market it's locked in for
Well,
3,
so-
6, 9 months or,
So see the line, the column says multi-bank securities.
uh-huh,
That's the one that's locked in. The others are very liquid.
okay.
And Life may offer a higher yield than money market. Or,
Yes, the
yeah.
money market isn't offering us any, that yield is very close to the checking account at this point. Life, I think, they're trending up, they're almost around 4%. And then the multi-bank securities, these are bank CDs, so depending on when the CD was purchased. It could vary from like 4% to like 0.7%, and depending on when we bought the CD. Right now, we're getting a really high rate. And so we want to lock in that high rate for 5%.
How have we been doing that? I never noticed that before, that the money market is the clearinghouse or center spoke of the accounts as opposed to a checking account. Have we been doing that a long time?
Yeah. Yeah,
And it's all right, go ahead.
it changed radically in whatever year it was, probably 2013, when we borrowed money from Rabobank that became a Canada bank. So at that time, we had to close out a line of credit that we had that earned even, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was a depositable line of credit, so we could put money in. And that money market also served as our line of credit, and it was a higher yield, and we had to get rid of it to meet the covenants of the borrowing. So about that time, we shifted into this money market account, which is B of A, I believe.
This money market is by US.
US Bank, yeah.
Which is where the checking account is also.
Yeah. This,
All right,
So it's like, trying to alternate between zero or very close to zero.
Yeah,
Although lately the money market's been a little better.
I just never noticed that on the income side, the money market's the clearing account. Everything comes into the money market. I never noticed that before. From outside
Yeah.
sources. All right. And then all the expenses, well, appears to come out of the checking account.
Exactly. And as you go across, checking is the lowest yield, the money market's next, late is a little higher, and then our ladder certificates.
I had one question, Alvin, if you're done.
Yeah, I'm done.
So on the expenses for board members, was that the trip to DC? I mean,
Let's see, this is February, I don't think those were, some of them did, yes, February.
Yeah, some of the.
I have no further questions.
And then, well, also, we had the stipend for meetings attended and so forth.
Isn't, that's a different category though. That's right above it.
okay, no further questions on the treasurer's report?
Well, and just one last thing on the retirement, the post separation retirement expenses. I mean, we're within budget on that, aren't we? I thought we were.
Yeah, those are part of our operating budget, so far we are trending.
Trending
So it's as per budget.
as per budget. Yeah, I thought we were within the budget,
within
even.
the budget. So far.
Yeah, not to belabor this meeting, but cities and frankly, the county, any public agency that doesn't have certain control over raising their revenues, if you're just dependent on transient
Right.
occupancy tax, depends on how many people come, or sales tax. and so forth. That's where you see both the PERS and post-retirement benefits just start eating away more and more of the budget. Water, wastewater, and garbage utilities have control over rate setting. We haven't had to exert control recently, but when we created the water supply charge, that was a Prop 218 effort, just like a water bill or a rate or a charge. And so we're in a position where we can actually raise revenues It's a little challenging because we have to go through this Prop 218 protest hearing process. But as we begin to see any of those start to eat away at our overall budget, we would probably come to you and say, hey, this is Prop 218 and raise things. But the other piece of our, major piece of our revenues is the user fee. And because the user fee is 8% of the CalAm bill, and the CalAm bill is, you know, the upward trajectory, it's also increasing over time. So we're keeping pace both with inflation and a lot of our retirement requirements, because those have been growing. Now that the water supply charge has been limited by the courts, we do have to look at that again as we go into the budget, because it's going to get us back to where we need to be, we're going to need CalAm rates to go higher, probably for 4 more years to make up the difference in what we're losing for the water supply charge. But the overall message is we're able to grow our revenues both just by virtue of CalAm rates going up, as well as if we wanted to do a Prop 218 process, whereas other fixed revenue entities struggle whenever you see these retirement benefits.
Well, and that's a problem of school districts and cities and counties, not so much utilities like us, because the 218 process, to me, is a much easier process than what they have to go through.
But you're bringing this in to pay attention. Aren't you getting a retirement benefit?
Oh, yeah.
So they're paying. They're continuing to pay.
No, they still do, but also they also adopted, I mean, I don't know, I was tier 1, I think, at the time. They're up to tier 4, which every next tier is less benefit.
My recollection of the annual budget process, or maybe it was a semi-annual, I can't remember. We were pretty generous in estimating the post-separation retirement costs. I mean, we should be in, and we're in budget.
Yeah. I think those costs are less than 100.
So we're good.
Well, it's good to have these discussions because that's how we get better understanding of things.
And I'm trying not to provide more information than asked for, but there are mechanisms that we could employ to further kind of take care of these costs, like the liability that the district has going forward. We could come up with an accrual study and then see what the liability is, and then at some point even look for some kind of an OPEB trust fund, which is what some cities and budget agencies employ. Right now, we don't have a separate OPEB trust, and so this is all part of it.
Yeah, well, we talked about a trust for OPEB. We said we just
Yeah,
didn't,
we
we
have.
don't really need it, do we? It doesn't serve us.
Correct. I mean, it would serve us, but even its value will vary based on the discount rate and the earnings rate of PERS and so forth. So the idea is, don't try to do your entire liability and think that you've got it solved.
Right.
And also don't overreach because,
It's locked in the trust at that.
yeah, it becomes like trust. So,
I mean, I just feel like, in my sense, we can manage it. We're managing pretty well without a trust.
that's what City of Stockton said.
Well,
Well, are we at a critical I mean, is there a critical mass before you get enough funds that make it worthwhile to be in that game, be in that process? No?
I think General is still like hit it really nicely. If we have the option to go through a Prop 218 process, and these costs could be deemed as part of our regular operating expenses, then maybe we have the revenue year over year to cover it. But if that's not the case, then maybe have the second chance of having that trust. So maybe it requires some analysis.
Yeah, and and we'll bring it back, we'll talk about it. There's other options to do what's called the sidecar financing, where you just
Sure.
raise monies, retire that much of the liability, and pay off through operations the debt. I think Monterey One Water went through that 15, 20 years ago. The City of Carmel did about a decade ago. there's different ways to skin the cat, but until your liability is looking really ominous, then what we've been doing kind of on a pay-as-you-go basis is just fine. And plus we, tucked away a little $500,000 every year.
I like that, a little half a million.
Okay, well, we're managing it. That's what the conclusion of this is, even though we're being educated in the process. Okay, I think we're supposed to approve this report. I'd entertain a motion.
Move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0. Item number 2. Item number 3, revised purchasing policy. Michelle,
So, the third item is to consider the adoption of a revised purchasing policy for the district. And as you can see in exhibit 3A, the city's, the district's existing purchasing policy was adopted in 1997. It requires it needs updates on several fronts, including updating the purchasing thresholds that were adopted in 1997. And also, there was room to define standards and procedures for purchasing some services and supplies for the district and kind of align them with best practices. So that's what this new policy is about. So the overarching goal of this policy is to ensure that, all the equipment, the services, the supplies that are required for the operation of the district are available in a timely manner and are also cost effective and provide best value for the district. And so that's what this policy is about. I'm just going to go through some of the highlights on the screen. So this is the table of contents for the policy. As you can see, there are 8 chapters here,
Policy as proposed.
but this is a proposed policy. So chapter 1 is just general guidelines related to ethics and accountability, who's responsible, and what should be the guidelines to ensure that the district is maintaining a reputation for fairness and integrity. And I'll go through the chapter. So this is just a very high level view. And chapter 2 is the different purchasing methods that district can employ. So this is petty cash, credit cards, purchase orders, and contracts. Then there's also a section for urgent or emergency purchases. And that's because one of the goals of this policy is to ensure continuity of operations. And so I'll go into that a little bit. And then chapters 3 and 4 are about informal and formal competitive processes. Chapter 5 is about exemptions. And then 6 is about purchasing specifications. Here we want to ensure that the specifications are describing the performance standards and they aren't like reducing competition. And then finally, there's a section on disposal of surplus property and the risk management, which ties to insurance requirements and warning requirements. So I'm just going to go through this page by page, and you're welcome to interrupt me for any comments or items for consideration. So this first chapter, so let's have to see on this screen. But maybe you can follow along.
can I start out with a question?
Yes, please.
Did anything happen in the processing of just some purchasing issues since 1997 that triggered this review? It seemed like it's a pretty old policy to be updating, and I think it's
Well, there was
It's
another
worthwhile.
step where the amount that, for example, that I could authorize without board approval was changed to 15,000. But apart from that, no, we were in need of a policy, and frankly, should pat our new CFO on the back for recognizing that it wasn't a current and well-crafted purchasing policy available, and you should have.
no, I accept that. I accept that reasoning. So thank you. But proceed, please.
Yeah, I want to say two big reasons. One is the purchasing limits that, that were adopted in 1997 don't serve us because, we can't buy much for $150. That was the purchasing limit for POs. And then petty cash and other things. And plus, the previous policy did not define contracts and, the types of solicitations that the district might engage in. And so I'm going to walk you through some of the major changes as we go through this PDF. So number one, so the first section is just about the goals of the policy, which I went over, the responsibilities, the general manager has overall responsibility, and the day-to-day operations of the purchasing system is delegated to the CFO and the administrative services manager. The big change here is the adoption of the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act. And I think this will provide a level of uniformity for public works types of projects. And, go through that. So the next section. So there are some general guidelines about ethics and accountability. I'll just highlight that division managers have the supervisory responsibility to ensure that purchases are made within budgetary constraints. So anything here needs to be budgeted. I think that's what it's saying. Even if it's regardless of how it's being purchased, whether it's through a credit card or a purchase order or through a contract. This section on the screen, 1.2.3, this goes into additional guidelines. So requiring a business justification, appropriate documentation, order splitting is not allowed to avoid the purchase limits. And then, there's just anyone who purchases on behalf of the district needs to exercise good judgment in the use and stewardship of resources. So chapter 2 is about purchasing methods. Here, the big change is the current policy had a limit of $50 for petty cash purchases. A petty cash purchase is for a small item that's like immediately needed. And the new policy proposes a limit of $150 per request.
Just buying bagels and cream cheese for the staff meeting once a month, so $80.
But that wouldn't be petty cash because that's not an emergency.
No, petty cash is used for, like, let's say we ran out of paper towels. and we
Yeah.
Had to run out.
Right.
I wouldn't call it emergency, but it's just any minor purchase.
Right.
Say we had a meeting, we wanted to get lunch brought in, rather than asking some employee to do an expense reimbursement with their own credit card, or the district credit card is not available, they could petty cash.
Yeah, it's a small amount of cash that's small purchases, unanticipated purchases. Section 2.2 is about credit cards, and this goes into a lot of detail that I won't go into, but I'll highlight that there are some restricted uses on when credit card cannot be used. For instance, cash advances, gasoline purchases, because the district has separate cards for gasoline purchases, from Shell and I think Chevron. So also personal items, prize money, anything that has a maintenance agreement for machinery, and any item that's available on a routine purchase order. So that's the restriction purchase. Then the section goes into like the statement processing guidelines for credit card purchases, which I won't go into this point.
Well, I just want to add commentary. We have some recent history in our county where people have misused credit cards and gotten their ass in deep trouble because of it. So I'm glad to see this attention to credit card management controls.
And do we go out and look at other credit cards? In essence, Chevron
Yes,
and Shell, I think they're some of the highest. For gas,
you mean how much the district is spending on Chevron and gasoline credit cards?
Yeah,
Yes.
Go out, shop around and. see what you can get.
Oh, okay. So if I understand your question, does the district check if it's just getting the best
Yeah,
rates? for
every,
the-
yeah, every 5,
Mhm.
10, how long we on that, those people, you know, those companies? You know.
Yeah, so we use US Bank for the general credit card. What's our fuel credit card?
Chevron and Shell.
They're
Yeah.
located in the Fernal Valley, which is one that's referenced, yeah.
And some of those gas, in the valley, gas stations been sold out, haven't they? Somebody brought them, I heard.
I think there's still Chevron and Shell in Carmel Valley.
Well, there's two at the mouth of the valley. Shell.
Okay, no,
And I
no,
think that Shell just got acquired.
yeah, now I understand, they in the area that we use, so.
Yeah.
It's not like being on the peninsula where you got different, okay.
Although,
Upside-
you know, to your point about competitiveness, I mean, we have Costco credit card. Because they're always, I like to joke that you get free chicken with your Costco bill. Because you end up saving $5 and you walk in and you get a rotisserie chicken. So you don't really save anything, because you drove over there, you must get chicken. But it is cheaper at Costco. So,
Yeah, well, now I understand why you out in that area, there's only 2 gas stations in that area. So.
So approximately.
Okay,
So section 2.3 and 2.4, this is about general purchasing limits. The big change here is the requirement for purchase orders. So the previous policy had it at $150, and the new policy is proposing that the limit for purchase orders be increased to $500. And below that, the purchase would still be budgeted, but it could be processed as a normal PP accounts processing kind of purchase. It doesn't need to be a purchase order. So there are 4 tiers of purchase limits that are defined here. Anything under $500, that's any stuff that's delegated by the division manager. Anything less than $10,000 can be approved by the division managers, the district engineer, or the designee. Less than 25,000 can be approved by the general manager, and anything above 25,000 requires board approval. And the reason we chose this limit is because the board right now sees contracts above 25,000 as an informational item every month anyway, so these limit, the upper limit coincides with that.
And frankly, even things, you know, at or below the 10,000 limit or the 25,000, we try to bring the finance administration and the board into aware of it. This is fairly typical, I would say, most special districts.
Yes, I think these are the we can go above and beyond. So the next section is about the type of contracts. This policy defines 7 different types of contracts. The first one is a standing supply agreement for repetitive use kind of supply. So you could just enter into a supply contract with Home Depot and then just use that contract to make repeat purchases. So that's a standing supply agreement. Master service agreement, the same kind of concept, but could be used for services. So for instance, if the district buys like groundwater modeling or monitoring service, then that could be a multi-year contract, and there could be just purchase orders that could be released against that contract over time. So that's like a multi-year agreement. I think right now, the district enters into a contract every year, but I think it might be more efficient if we had the district grows to have more of these multi-year agreements. The next tab is cooperative purchase agreements. So the district could piggyback on a purchase that's made by other public jurisdiction. There are also contracts that are available by other entities, like NASPO and NIGP, like National Institute of Government Purchasing and National Institute of State Procurement Officials. These are like blanket contracts, and and they are already vetted and gone through a procurement process. And they come up with a pricing table, and so what the district could do is just use that contract that has already gone through a procurement mechanism. So that's what the third type of contract is. Then the fourth type is professional services agreements. These agreements are based on, are based for consultants that, I think these are not price-based, these are based on competence and experience. So I think that's what this section says. Then grant-funded projects, and then the sixth type is general services and non-public works type of projects. And here, there are recommendations for informal and formal solicitation. So anything less than $10,000, if it's general service or a non-public works type of project, then the proposed policy says that staff needs to, it recommends an informal solicitation for anything less than $10,000. Anything between 10,000 and 25,000 would require an informal solicitation, but formal solicitation is recommended. And then anything above $25,000 requires a formal solicitation. So the idea here is we're like trying to balance controls with efficiency. And we don't want to enter into a situation where, let's say we spend $1,000 of staff time to purchase a $9,000 service. And so that's why we have, there's a little bit of judgment involved in coming up with these limits. And then finally, the seventh type of contract is public works, and these would follow the guidelines that are established by the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act. And so for construction projects, the guidelines are higher, and they keep changing. I think the current guidelines are anything less than 60,000 doesn't require to be bid out. Anything between 60 and 200,000 can go through an informal solicitation process, and anything above 200,000 requires formal bid or solicitation. Then section 2.7, this is about change orders. Here it's saying that contract amendments and change orders would generally not exceed 10% of the original contract. And any incidental increases related to taxes, shipping, and handling, those do not require contract amendment. So there's a little bit of then we come to section 2.8. This is about emergency and urgent purchases. So an emergency purchase, there's a section in the appendix. It defines what's an emergency purchase and what's an urgent purchase. So I'm just going to highlight here that any purchase that's sudden and unexpected, and it is needed to prevent loss of property, public health, safety, or ensure essential public services, is defined as an emergency purchase. And the general manager has the power to enter into an emergency purchase and come back to the board for approval after the fact, or whenever it's feasible and practical.
So, excuse me. Flushing of the wells. Does that fall under this? And even though we're putting off the time for.
Yeah, well, I think it falls under the section 2.8 emergency, but that's what we're talking
All right.
Yeah, disaster or local designated emergency also gives the general managers the powers to enter into. And, chapter 3 is about informal competitive codes. And anything less than $10,000 doesn't require competitive codes, although it's recommended. And then the next section, chapter 4, is about formal competitive pricing. Here, the policy lays out 3 different types of procurement mechanisms. a request for proposals, a request for qualification, or an invitation to bid. And it goes into details of what each of these means. An invitation to bid is generally something that's based solely on price. And so the bid is awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. And the RFP and an RFQ could have non-price factors into the evaluation process. And then chapter 5 is about exempt purchases, so purchases that may not have an open market. And so examples are, when we're buying utilities, insurance, advertisements, travel expenses, tax payments, payments to other government agencies. These are exempt purchases, so you don't need to go out and like get bids and quotes for these. And that's generally typical. And then finally, under exempt purchases, we also have purchases that are defined as exempt under Government Code 52060, and this relates to the fields of financial, economic, accounting, engineering, legal, and administrative matters. And I think all the legal contracts that the city and the district has right now, I think they fall under this one. Also, there's a section on sole source purchases. So from time to time, the district will purchase items that are kind of proprietary in nature. And so, we could just staff would just provide a sole source specification and make the purchase. And the limits are depending on the 4 tiers that were defined earlier. So if the purchases were above $25,000, then there will be a staff report with the justification for that sole source that would come to the report. Yeah, corporate purchasing agreements that wants to be sent. Chapter 6, this is about guidelines for purchase specifications, and here it says explicitly that the purpose of these specifications is to describe the standards of quality, performance, and the characteristics that the district desires, and it's not intended to limit or restrict competition. Chapter 7, this is about disposal of surplus property. The big change here is defining what we mean by surplus property. And so this policy defines that as anything above $5,000 in original or market value and a useful life of more than 5 years. So what this means is if you're getting rid of CPU and laptops, those wouldn't fall under the threshold of the surplus property. That's just an expense. And we could
Can you think of anything that would fall under surplus in the past that we over purchased?
Well, it's not usually over purchase, but when we move to a more current computers, we've got the old boxes, which have some value, not more than 5,000. An old truck that we do trade in, so that one kind of gets around the surplus. But
I can't see you buying over $5,000 worth of.
well, we've had the computer towers when they all got replaced among 25 plus people. Collectively, it's over 5,000 plus worth of surplus. So it could be, but typically fully depreciated. So
Well, there's that, and then
almost no value.
yeah, and the other sort of problem I have with it is, if you bought 20 CPUs,
Yeah.
over a period of 3 years, and 10 years down the road, you're like, we're going to get rid of them. But the problem is that's probably anywhere from 5 to 20 invoices, not really. So each one was less than 5,000.
Yeah.
Now, if you want it, I feel like
Yeah, if
I feel like you're gonna get-
district's jet ski up on Myers Reservoir.
we don't. So I understand precision's a problem. The other problem is or the concern I have with all of this, I know you didn't finish read school and got to part 8 and then definitions. I just have to jump in. Where did we get this from? Was this a template we borrowed?
So this is what we have seen in other public jurisdictions, and they have $5,000 limit. Again, could it be 6,000? Could it be, I think it's a limit that, again, the trade-off between efficiency and control, how do we draw that line? And so this is how, I've seen in other places that I've been, but we're open to any suggestions.
I mean, look, I'm just a director. You guys are running the show on a day-to-day basis on operations, so I don't have a dog in this fight, but okay, can I just, you love all of you in this room. It's not a reflection on that. You hate this document. I really do, because from a lawyer's perspective, or at least from a perspective of, so what am I required to do? The number of shoulds, the number of mays, the number of, how are you supposed to know if you can use your credit card and not get into trouble with the federales or the police or whoever, because you bought with your credit card a ergonomic keyboard? That this thing says no personal items. Personal items is not defined in the appendix. I look, and so I know, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? You're saying it's not a personal item and you shouldn't get fired and prosecuted because it was for work, but it could be personal for you because nobody else gets to use it and it's in your office, or maybe it's in your home office. So all of the shoulds, all of the woulds, I mean, if I'm an employee, I just want to know, what do I need to do so I don't get fired? What do I need to do so I know that I'm not going to have somebody tell me something I'm doing wrong? As for all of, and that's, these guidelines are great. They're excellent. Like, they all make sense up until the one we didn't even cover yet, the insurance risk. I love them all, but I don't know how you're supposed to. I don't know. It's very, 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 very malleable and touchy-feely, and how many angels can dance on the head of a pin on when you get to fact specific. Like you say, the computers, if you bought 10 piece CPUs on the same invoice, it's over $5,000.
So.
But if you're getting rid of the 10 CPUs at the same time, but back in the day you bought them with separate invoices, each one was under $5,000. So we start getting into all of that. So I don't know. I'm sorry. Did I not take my medication?
I appreciate the input and feedback. I'll just say that this type of policy is typical. And I've worked with policies like this before. And since this is the public's money, we as a fiduciary, we are held to a higher standard. And so there needs to be like these guidelines in place to get what the district needs, but also make sure that we're compliant and and get the best value and all that. And there would be areas where this policy can be tightened up. This is supposed to be a living document. And so for instance, if it doesn't define whether the surplus property is individual invoices or a combined set of invoices, in my mind, it was just one equipment. If it's a discrete thing, then
Right.
that, we don't like look at 10 combined. But maybe that's not well defined, and we could,
No, and I know, and I think that, and the effort was there. Obviously, look at the appendix. There's pages of defined terms. Well, 3 pages. I just, it's up to you guys, obviously. Run the show you where you want to.
I think it's good. Working in government, looking at this from those 4 pages to this is a great improvement because it's explaining everything that goes on. Then that one vague, I could say that about what you're saying about that first document, that 1997, and now we finally updating it at 2024. Yeah, you've done a lot of work, and I know we've been following these rules all along because we did surplus property last month and we got rid of a bunch of computers, old ones. So, yeah.
Well, and if I can add just some personal experience, a lot of the gray area that might emerge from your questions get managed in the process of being exposed in the process of administering the rules, and therefore you deal with the individual. It's employee A who's taken some advantage and so on, and needs to be educated. And so it goes to the supervisor, or it goes to the GM, and you kind of correct as you go along because, and so many of small issues in public arena, I think, are complaint based. They don't have enforcement officers looking at everything. So you get a complaint, you say, oh, gotta look at that. So then you gotta, whatever, and it may amount to something, it may not.
Yeah.
But that's how you get alerted to it.
No, the guidelines, and I probably was being tongue in cheek when I said, "You hate this." I don't hate this. They're all logical. They make sense. The limits in here all make sense. 500 versus 150, 150 versus 50. All of that. They all make a lot of sense. I guess the question maybe is, when we call it a purchasing policy, what does that mean? In other words, what does everybody who works here understands? Is it a guideline?
It's a guideline.
You know,
It's a guideline because those first 4 pages, I can go out and do whatever. And first thing I would come in and say to the general manager, where the policy at? I brought gas for my private vehicle.
mhm.
What the policy at?
And
So,
we'll very likely find some errors in drafting when something comes up. If we find a situation that we didn't seem to have addressed, but it also provides certain protections, like when you have an employee do a cash advance for $7,500 off a corporate credit card, there's grounds for dismissal right there without a whole lot of discussion. If there's actually a written policy. So, you know,
Right. I mean,
I don't like the rules myself, but
you're a scofflaw. I knew that about you. Well, I mean, like I said, they're all logical. They all make sense, and they all, I think, provide a lot of guidance. But I think just, you know, maybe, like, for example, I honestly, if I was looking at this from an HR perspective, the things that are specifically employee specific, maybe less general manager specific, if they were reduced to a separate document that really was black and white, that wasn't touchy feely, just so they really, so everybody's got really good good notice of what do I do with my credit card, the biggest one, really, the 2 credit cards, gas and company. Something like that might, because it might get lost in all of the suggestive stuff. But I have no problem with anything in this document. The limits make a lot of sense, you know.
Well, and to address that point specifically, so this is a policy and then the general manager, he can make rules specific to employees. So there could be additional workplace rules that get put in place that align with the policy to add that clarification. So it's not without outside the realm.
Sure.
And this does remind me, Shill, that if the board does pass it, which we hope they do, we're going to need to add something to the employee handbook that directs them to read and follow the purchasing policy.
And there's a section here where I think every so often staff's gonna be trained on the policy guidelines. And the whole goal is to make it less ambiguous. I think ambiguity works against us. And I think that's what Director Edwards was saying. And so, like, defining it, but not making it rigid. And so, like, that's the balancing act of this policy.
Yeah, all right, get that. Definitely get that.
yeah, this is a great improvement from 4 pages to 19.
Yeah.
This is
I
great.
did- I actually,
improvement.
I did
I don't
read
know how
the-
we
I
got
read the
to
old
pass
one.
transparency with that first policy.
With the little chart, I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, you,
Yeah, well, and that just maybe shows my ignorance for not working in public. Before this gig.
Well,
So chapter 8, I was actually at the very end, and I won't go into this, but so risk management is related to insurance requirements and requirements for contract bonds, and some of these requirements are specific to public work contracts where we have performance bonds, warranty, material bonds, and others in place. And again, it's to shield us from risk, contractual risk. So it's just defining that policy expects that these requirements be enforced. That's it. I won't go into the appendix. I'm sure there are areas where we could add and further define. And maybe I'll add the personal one there.
Actually, I thought it was pretty comprehensive, up to and including frankly the risk management stuff.
So this is gonna be on,
Next week's board.
next week board, but we're gonna put it up in,
Consent.
consent, yes. Consent instead of making a action item, so,
If you want to make it an action item, you can make it an action item.
wow.
I'd like to see it on consent and see if
See if somebody wants to pull
he
it.
wants to pull it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A great improvement.
Well, I'd just like to comment that I think there's catching up with inflation
Yeah, for sure.
is a good objective here. The balance between efficiency and control, I think, is a good comment to make. I appreciate your just kind of approaching it from that angle. I just wanted to say I'm pleased to see the ethics provision in it. I was pleased to see the extensive it around credit cards, because I think that's a real vulnerable place for employees. I'm just giving you my reactions. I like your description of the various types of contracts, which didn't seem to exist in the earlier format. I'm glad to see the update, very much so. And a question I have, which I didn't quite understand, the contracts for public projects. And I think, David, was you were commenting about, you mentioned about 60K and something like 200 or over 200K. And I didn't understand what that related to in terms of what you were trying to explain. And I kind of missed the point.
Yeah.
That might have been me.
I missed that.
Okay.
That's section 2.6.7.
Yes.
So the contracts for non-public work so the limits for non-public work purchases versus public works purchases, separate requirements.
Separate issues. Okay.
Yeah, and so for non-public works, I think, we have that $25,000 cap. And, 10,000 and $25,000 for public works, you can't buy much for that amount. For $10,000, maybe you can get a wire permit. So there are like higher limits for public works contracts as defined by the California Uniform Standard.
Okay, and then the 60 or the 200, whatever the numbers that were thrown out are defined in the state law.
In the state law, yeah.
Okay.
Or the regulations.
Well, and just going through, I like the details around the change orders. I like the description of the way you just make it clear and that everybody can kind of understand, but even people like me, RFP, RFQ, and the invitation for bid. Sole source purchases. I like the focus on that because I think that also has become a place where contentious issues can emerge on that issue alone. I like the extensive definition section. So those are the things that I like. And I like that we no longer deal with 1997 rules.
I was surprised to see that this is the first revision since 1997. That's actually.
And as I mentioned, we've made just minor modifications. So, we didn't even have district credit cards probably 10 years ago. 12 years ago, maybe. And then just recently, we kind of pushed it into the division managers level. So we're going to be getting them credit cards. Have they come yet?
No, we couldn't because the previous policy restricted us.
Yeah,
So
okay,
this
yeah.
policy gives us that.
Gives us the latitude. So, yeah, there's been a lot of changes that have, outpaced our policies.
Mhm. That's why I say it's good. 4 pages to 19, great job.
I'm still looking for that policy of the board that says Anything not written is up to the general manager to play fast and loose. with.
No, that's in there. I saw it.
Fast and loose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I'm gonna just back, keep my own words. I was being very tongue in cheek. It was just the note, like when something's discretionary, it's like, okay, well, what's the rule then?
Yeah.
And that was my only concern. That was it, and which was pervasive throughout. But I hear exactly what you're saying and what my colleagues are saying, which is it's this balance between give as much guideline as possible without straitjacketing. I think that's what I
Right.
said.
Mhm.
And so I'm happy to get my words on that.
And there's no action required, right? It's just placing it on the agenda? Or how to place it on the agenda?
It's the committee recommends that the policy be considered for board adoption. I think that's the.
I'd say on the consent calendar. Let's put it there and see where it goes, but
Good.
definitely before the board.
It may be beneficial to have a vote of the committee to recommend it for approval.
Okay, have a motion for approval of the policy.
I'll second it.
I'll move it. I moved it, you seconded. Okay, all in favor?
And
Aye.
that'll allow us in the staff note to say it was considered by the Finance Administration Committee and
Yeah.
recommended
And they
on a
recommend
3-0 vote.
Cause 1997, boy.
So did I get that right? That Nikhil, you just looked at the 1997 policy and decided
Yeah.
maybe we should do an
So
update?
the first thing when I came here, I was like, what's the policy? And then we were required to do purchase orders for like anything above $150, and that was slowing us down. And so it's like, okay, this needs to update, and then it was like, okay, this needs to update, and then from there on, we were just like, okay, we should just like.
This was totally,
introduce a new
this was
policy.
totally your initiative. That's impressive.
I don't want to take credit, but.
Oh, yeah. you
Give
got
give
it
him
right.
give him credit.
GM,
Yeah.
GM pointed at you.
Yeah, I thought that's what it was.
Yep.
That's actually very impressive.
That's very good.
Long overdue.
Very good.
Chair, we have a motion and a second on the table. You want to take a vote on that?
Yes, okay, all in favor of the motion to approve the policy?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0.
All right.
Okay, information, couple items. The contract's over 25,000. Any comments from the committee? Any comments from GM?
Yeah, I just want to say that Nikhil's done a yeoman's job at trying to clean these up. So on the contracts over 25,000, a few months ago, it was clear that there were some old items, and we went through all the divisions and tried to clean them up. And now it's a recurring responsibility of one of his staff to look at closing out purchase orders for contracts so that we can keep this a little more clean. On the second one, on Exhibit 5A, there will still be a few more changes, but we've been trying to clean the Measure J expenditures up as well. And a couple of the helpful things that have happened are the titles are now a little clearer, like what is phase 4, what is phase 3, what was phase 2. But I want to highlight a couple of things just so you know. On the first page of Exhibit 5A, in the current phase 4, so the top box,
Mhm.
it says District Legal Counsel, total expended to date, 62,466.
Mhm.
In conversation with Nikhil, we've determined that there's a piece of that should be in the LAFCO litigation, and there's a piece of that should be back in phase 3. So we'll have that revised next time. But as you go down into phase 2, so the top of the second page, you'll see that right under that box, now we've put the litigation. These two little litigation boxes, so CEQA litigation legal services and LAFCO litigation legal services, have been floating through this chart, kind of untethered. But they were both related to the phase 2. You may recall that during LAFCO, we decided to do an EIR,
Right.
and then we got sued and we cleared the CEQA litigation. So that's closed. CEQA litigation is done. But the LAFCO litigation, by virtue of the appeal, remains open, but we're keeping it down here as if affiliated with phase two, because the whole LAFCO process was that phase. And so we're going to continue to incur expenditures down in this section of the chart. So it doesn't mean that everything is now up in the very tippy top. But it's clearer now for us internally to just leave these two litigations here. One remains open. And then the new eminent domain, going back again, back to the top of the first page, we've taken Shoot Mahali and rolled them up into the box, eminent domain legal counsel, because their work started with the CEQA lawsuit. Then they became the LAFCO litigation attorney, but now they're co-counsel for LAFCO related issues on the eminent domain proceeding. And we found that there was enough overlap in time that expenses that they were now starting to incur for the eminent domain proceeding looked like they were still back with the LAFCO, or even maybe attributed to CEQA. So we're doing a better job at separating those, just to kind of keep these pieces separate. But the other important thing on all this is your running total, your running tally of what we've spent. And so again, when you get oh, you're exposed to so much. Well, so much of what we're exposed to, we've already expended. When we come to you with a budget for this year, we will have a true budget for the eminent domain proceeding, because what you see reflected here, the roughly 600,000 that we authorized, or that you authorized, that was just to get us through the fiscal year. Rutan and Tucker alone were at 1.2 million for the total proceeding. So we'll pick up the rest of it in the budget discussion, the budget workshop.
So one little small point, and that's, I appreciate your explanation on page 2. The amount.
Page 2,
uh,
not phase 2.
Phase
page
2,
Okay.
both phase 2 and page 2.
Okay,
So we're about to hit our limit for LAFCO litigation once the appellate work starts. I mean, it may not be, I mean, we're not the appellant, so we have some time before the respondent brief, but do we need to budget and authorize more than the 400,000? And what's our timeline for doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we probably should. I think I can bring it next month instead of,
Should
Next
it be in
week.
a new budget?
well, there will need to be some in the budget, but we're going to incur costs because of the appeal probably this fiscal year. So
Yeah,
we're going to need something. Yeah.
I mean, Michael, have they even perfected the record yet?
No, they haven't perfected the record yet. We're still kind of proceeding through that path.
I mean, that takes months. They have to perfect the record, then they do the opening brief. They're probably gonna ask for extensions. So by the time that brief comes, it'll be the first time when the lawyers.
Yeah, it may end up in next fiscal year. I mean, we got 2.5 months left in our July to June.
Mhm.
And we'll look at that. Yeah.
I was also gonna say the major case CEQA litigation, looks like there's some money remaining there. That's the item before that, the 200,000.
Yeah, maybe we can just, well, can't we just reallocate it? I mean, there's
Yeah.
not gonna be any more CEQA costs, right? It's done.
Correct. Yeah, and that would be the best play, except that we've probably already clawed it back because that was a different
Oh,
budget
right.
year,
Yeah.
unexpended
Yeah, right.
amounts. So
Yeah, I bet we did. I just pointed out because even though it's on phase 2, that one item is a live item.
yeah,
So somebody's gonna go, wait, you only budgeted 400,000.
yeah. Are you working on that one?
I have had limited touching on that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's shoot Mahali. Yeah, we'll figure out whether we're going to have any expenditures. Because I think right now we're caught up mostly in the eminent domain because we have to do the response to the
Discovery,
demur.
Oh, demur, yeah.
And that's what they're spending all their time on. And then we have the interrogatories and they'll review that. But there's not a whole lot of activity on the appeal other than they said they were going to appeal, but they haven't filed their
Do you know
Yeah.
if they,
So they gave notice of appeal, but
they
they
had
haven't
notice of
filed.
appeal, do you know if they, oh, this is an administrative record appeal. Did they proceed by appendix, do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, administrative record appeals have their own little pathway.
And so because they appealed, they're gonna have to file first with
Wow.
what their
That's
causes
right.
of action or whatever that you want to call it. And then we would reply brief on that. So it could be that we're not going to see anything
I doubt
this
you're gonna
fiscal
see it.
year.
I don't think you're gonna get an opening brief before the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
So maybe nothing.
But thank you for highlighting it because because it's open and we're running out of budget, that we should watch it.
There's another angle on this same issue. Should part of the retreat be addressing some of these issues?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you need to know what we're facing going forward. And also there's some items that we have to, that I've kind of signaled to the Measure J team that we probably should undertake. But you don't necessarily have to undertake. There are some nuances here that because of our, not only did our investment banker back off because of reasons I've explained, but the individual investment banker who was working on it that did the Missoula project has been laid off. So Barclays, his boss, who I've known for 30 years, has said, we're there for you when the time comes, but that may not be the avenue we want to take. But also we're having difficulties with operating engineers. So,
Let's finish up
yeah.
this and talk about.
So we'll
that
talk about these types
off,
of
off air.
phase
You know,
4
Let's
activities.
finish up
Yeah.
administrative.
Okay.
So
Madam J looks good.
I don't have any other comments on the 25,000. I like the updates you guys did to the Measure J stuff.
Okay, and thanks, Alvin, for reminding me. Okay,
Yeah.
that's all on so item 5. Item 6 is the draft of the next agenda.
Yeah, and I want to highlight a couple of things. I believe that Dave Laredo has arranged for Michael Colantano to be available for closed session item 1. And that's to talk a little bit about resolution of that case, as we talked about in closed session
Mhm.
previously. Item 2, we were notified on Friday of a desire to negotiate on the labor MOU. So I have something I can report to you, but it will not be, probably not requesting, well, might request action or direction. I don't think there's a whole lot to be said under 3 and 4, other than just a quick update unless something different happens between now and then. On the regular session, there's very little.
Before you
Yeah.
leave that, right before I came in, I noticed that there are 3 listing for the taxpayers. And Mark was saying, but there are only 2 cases, one's an appeal. And then the other, how do you count them, 3 or 2?
Guess there's
Um,
3.
Yeah, so we count them as 4, where number 1 was resolved a long time ago. Previously,
Okay.
we had 2 and 3 going. But yeah, now Dave labeled them 1, 2, 3, and 4, the current cases. And I think 1 was in a reverse validation request that doesn't move forward.
Anyway, I don't need the
because-
full explanation, but I just.
Yeah,
I'm just curious
there
about
actually
it.
are 4.
There are 4.
And we
Wow.
can maybe get you a little understanding of what they are.
Okay,
Um,
I think that might be helpful if we.
I know, I got confused too. I didn't
Yeah.
realize there were that many.
Yeah, one was the one they lost, like 6 years ago. So the most recent ones are 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so much for that. Yeah, let's go to the regular board meeting.
Yeah, so at the last board meeting, so look at item 8. At the last board meeting, there was a request to consider pine cone for distribution of the annual report. We did get some fee quotes, but you should realize that the weeklies distribution is actually happening this week. It's scheduled for this Thursday. So first off, we just want to see how the weekly distribution goes and to see if there's any public feedback, letters to the editor, or, you're wasting resources type of thing, whatever it is,
Or thanks.
rather than jumping straight into the pine cone. But I will have some data to report on the pine cone. But I'm leaning towards, hey, this is a great new attempt. Maybe just do the weekly this year and then look at the pine cone and the weekly next year, if there's no fallout from doing this one. But anyway, so that's on there. The presentation item 11, that was a request, I think, of you, Director Edwards. And it's timely. We're still getting all sorts of questions about when's water going to be allocated and when's the CDO going to be lifted and all of that. So
Yeah, I like your timetable. I seen it on the YouTube. I
Yeah.
looked at the presentation,
yeah.
the water demand, it was good.
Yep. And I just told, so we had two business owners from Carmel who sent in a bunch of questions. And people mix up credit and allocation and entitlement quite a bit. So we're trying to straighten them up, but we realized, we need some frequently asked questions with brief answers, like when is water going to be allocated? When can I get a meter? Those kinds of things. And so we're working on some FAQs that maybe I'll share as part of this presentation. But other than that, it's very light agenda. So let's
Michael, is there any
go home
chance?
early.
I don't think everybody necessarily wants it, but I wouldn't mind reading the opening brief and the respondent's brief, which just got filed on the closed session matter, taxpayer number 2. I'd like to read those briefs.
No. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if anybody else wants to get them too. I mean, it's just an email button.
Yeah. We'll send it out to the whole board and you can read it or ignore it. We'll just title it as a confidential FYI.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well,
it's not even confidential.
they're not
but-
even confidential. They're
But
public.
we'll label it FYI so that way you can read it or not, and there's no action required from you at this time.
Also in this agenda, are we going to get an update on the river? How that water,
Yeah,
You
it'll be
take-
in the GM's report on the
Go-
ASR.
yeah, well, ASR, and did they take their limit out of the river instead of,
Yeah, we can touch on those
So-
because they're
so I
not, we're not there yet. Early in the year, it looked to me like they were going to stay close to their river limit based on the quarterly water budget. I'm not so convinced anymore. So we should have a convo before the board meeting on what you guys think is reality. But yeah, we should. report
yeah.
on that.
Something changed that.
Give me something to bark at. And give give me something to bark at and give Mr. Laredo a chance to do a policy. Ordinance.
Yeah.
Cause if it's heading that way, let's get there. So.
Good.
Okay, no more comments from staff? No more comments from the committee?
Nope.
Adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Please.